That's interesting.
Big Keith, what are you doing?
You know, everyone's talking about this crazy inflation thing. Like, it's so hard to measure and understand. Clearly, if you just take a balloon and take the standard issue ruler tattoo that everyone has, you can easily get the data you need.
Well, you may be measuring the inflation of a balloon, but I'm not sure that's the inflation everyone's talking about. They're more than likely referring to the inflation that causes the cost of goods and services to go up.
Okay, well, how do you measure without a standard issue ruler tattoo?
It's simple. You can use things like the CPI. Before you even say it, no, it is not the robot from Star Wars. That's C-3PO. No, before you say that, that thing you got, where it burns when you pee, that's a UTI. CPI, not to be confused by fictional robots, stands for Consumer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index, CPI, is a key economic indicator that measures the average change of prices paid by consumers for goods and services over time. It is also used to track inflation and the cost of living. The CPI is calculated by taking a weighted average of the prices of a basket of goods and services, including housing, food and beverages, transportation, medical care, education and communication, apparel, and even entertainment. Meaning that if you understand what the CPI is and can calculate it, you can have unlimited power! And to tell your friends that you really know something about inflation. Or perhaps inflate your ego.
So once I solved for the change of price for a kilogram of apples, I found that the price increased nearly 44%. Yes, thank you, no problem, I know I'm a genius, thank you.
The Consumer Price Index was first developed by the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics during World War I. They first introduced the Cost of Living Index in 1919. Ironic, considering that there was a war going on. I'm sure the cost of living then was pretty high. In 1921, the first formal CPI was published, primarily for wages, and later was adjusted to include the prices of goods and services. So I had mentioned that the CPI was created and has been maintained by the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics, or BLS for short. Who is the BLS? What is its function? No, before you even say that, BLS is not that racial equality movement that broke out during COVID. That was BLM. I literally just said what the acronym meant. Anyway, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics is a U.S. government agency that's responsible for collecting, analyzing, and publishing key economic data, including employment, wages, and inflation statistics. The data they collect informs all kinds of economic policy, which in turn affects every aspect of the economy. For example, the CPI greatly influences the Federal Reserve and how it sets its interest rates. High inflation? The Fed may raise interest rates to slow spending. High unemployment? The Fed may lower interest rates to encourage job growth. The CPI also influences the cost of living adjustments for Social Security, which I hear is going away soon. But these are just a few examples of what the BLS does and how the CPI's data affects decisions. Okay, Brigbanes, it's time to do some math. Once we're done here, you'll be able to tell your friends that you can calculate the CPI and the inflation rate. Now, there are a jillion different ways to calculate the various metrics in the CPI. So we're going to use Laspierre's index formula, who is not a person, although I wish it was, because that's a cool name, and shows inflation on a fixed basket. The disadvantage of the formula is that it often overestimates inflation. And because it's fixed, that data can become outdated pretty quick. Also, Laspierre's just sounds cool. To start, the formula looks like this. We got a sideways M or whatever that is, and P with a bubble next to it. Let me help break it down for you, make it a little bit more manageable. So the PT stands for the prices at the current period. The PO stands for prices at the base period. Base period is prices at some point in the past. And the QO stands for the quantity at the time of the base period. So for example, the prices of eggs this year versus the prices of eggs last year and the quantity of eggs last year. The reason that the quantity is used twice and needs to be the same both times is because if we change those numbers, then the number that we will get will be inconsistent. So let's give an example that will probably age poorly in about 6 months. Eggs. I'm not gonna write it. It's tough to do.
No, don't do this to me.
It's tough to do quick. Oh, I'll do it again. Try again. Eggs. So let's say that eggs are worth $6 a dozen right now. So we would put 6 right here at current price. And they were worth $5.25 a dozen a year ago. So let's say that there's 7 dozen eggs in the entire world. So how this formula works is 6 times 7. So we plug in 6 times 7 equals 42, and 5.25 times 7 equals 36.75. So now you divide 42 by 36.75, and you'll get roughly 1.14.
Your marker died there. I think you gotta write that a little darker.
Damn it, dude. You talk. You need to shut up once in a while so we can just keep on going with these and continue to, and you'll get roughly 1.14. We're just mugging up this board again because Devin can't think. And you'll get roughly 1.14. That one felt good.
Yeah.
And then you're going to multiply that number by 100. So your CPI answer is 114. Which you can interpret to mean that your prices increased by 14% from last year. You can do this with multiple items too. Let's say apples are $2 a pound, and they were $1.68 a pound a year ago. There are 10 pounds of apples in the entire world. Pretty rare. So we take 2 times 10 to get 20, and we take 1.68 times 10 and get 16.8. So we add that to our basket of groceries to get $62 currently and $53.55 a year ago. We divide 62 by 53.55 and get roughly 1.16, which we then multiply by 100 and get 116, which you can interpret to mean this basket of items has increased by 16% from last year. Now you might be like, okay, how do we solve to find the inflation rate? Well, the formula for that is, so to calculate out the inflation rate, we first need to take the current CPI, what the CPI is today, subtract the previous CPI, and then divide by the same previous CPI. Now, that previous CPI can be any time in the past. We just need to make sure that they're the same period, and then multiply the whole thing by 100. So if we take the CPI for last year, which is 105, we would plug that here and here. And this year's CPI, we got 116, so we'd plug it there. So we subtract the 116 from the 105, and we get 11. And we take that 11 and divide it by 105, and we get 0.1048. And then we multiply that number by 100, and the answer we get is 10.48. Meaning the rate of inflation is 10.48% that year. Piece of cake. Or a piece of egg.
Piece of pie.
No, that's dumb. Well, I've sufficiently made your brain bigger. Like the balloon that Big Keith was blowing air into. You might see that this stuff isn't as complicated or as scary as you may think. It's a lot like managing your finances. If you're worried or intimidated about handling your finances, consider reaching out to your friendly neighborhood finance geek to get you started today. That's our show. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, when you go to your urologist, because it burns when you pee, don't ask him if you have a CPI. We'll see you next time.